So this little talk is entitled Proof versus Persuasion. And this is an itch that I've been wanting to scratch for some time now. Here in the Toronto Debating Society, we seem to be obsessed with the notion of proof. We frequently say that the government must prove a point, or that the opposition must disprove it. And we seem to regard the whole thing as a kind of an exercise in logic. And it certainly isn't. If you think about the kinds of topics, the titles that we have for debates, they're highly controversial. For example, we would have something like assimilation is the best policy for the native problem. Or if we didn't want to put it in those terms, something like assimilation is best for natives. Now, a topic like that has compelling evidence on both sides, so it's not something that can be reduced to logic. And yet we persist in this, and I'm wondering why. And I want to consider some of the difficulties we have with this obsession with proof, and how, if we got rid of that particular obsession and looked at debating in quite another light, perhaps it might improve our debating and our enjoyment of the exercise. There's nothing in our scoring system at the moment that specifically mentions proof. We have five pillars, if you like, of scoring. We have argument, 30%, content, 20%, refutation, 20%, rhetoric and style, 20%, and teamwork, 10%. So the only thing that really comes down to disproof would be refutation, a mere 20% of our scoring. Yet it seems to be the tail that wags the dog. It seems to be the thing that we get hung up on most. In our scoring guide, we also say that while you are expected to make some refutation of the opposition's points, you are certainly also expected to make points of your own. Yet I have seen debates, quite a number of them, one entirely on refutation, where the opposition made no points of its own whatsoever. It's a known fact here that the opposition wins most of the debates. I think the numbers I've seen are vary around 70 to 80%. And that's over a period of number of years. So there's a strong correlation with something. And what is it? After all, the government does have the advantage. They have the advantage of the definition, and they have the advantage of framing the initial arguments. They actually bring the debate to the opposition. The opposition has to more or less argue from within the government's frame of thinking. So with these woeful advantages, why is it that the opposition wins so many debates? And I think it's because we have a kind of sympathy for the underdog. We see the opposition finding one chink in the government's armor and flinging a stone at that, just like David's slingshot, knocking down Goliath. And that's it. We say, got them, demolished them. And we go for that. And we see this as a kind of disproof. And I hear it in the adjudication, I hear it in the academic or in the audience feedback later on, and I hear it at the pub. When we go up there, they talk about having found that fatal flaw in the government's argument and overturning it. A kind of a defining moment, if you like. There's something we like about that. It gives us a kind of an esoteric pride in debating, as if there was some kind of specifics that only we as debaters can actually winnow out from the arguments, and that this takes experience. And so we go on with these nostrums that it takes lots of experience to be an adjudicator, and the adjudicator has to cast aside all of the extraneous points and just hone in on that defining moment when the opposition overturned the government. And I don't like that kind of thing personally. Debating is not about esoteric truths that only we can see. I have seen perfectly good debates waged by rank beginners. So there is nothing so esoteric or arcane about debating. And I think we've got to get rid of this idea of the defining moment. I was talking one time to a political science student, and she told me that she had taken a course in elections. And the professor had told her about the defining moment, the famous one in Canadian electoral history with Brian Mulroney and John Turner in '84, when he said, "You, sir, had an option." And somebody called that a defining moment, and that got enshrined in political theory ever since. And we keep looking for it in every debate, even though it doesn't exist. We look for it in so many different things. A while back we had a good debate there. It was dogs are better than cats. Well, it seemed like a trivial debate, but it was actually quite a good debate. And I thought myself that the government lost the debate. I believe that the opposition, I voted for the opposition on that one. But the opposition did win, and the adjudicator went on to say that the government, that the opposition had shown that whether a dog or a cat is better for you depends on the individual, and that the opposition had overturned the government's argument that the government had failed to show that dogs were better in all cases. That if you're an elderly invalid living on the top floor of an apartment building, you might prefer a cat. You don't want to walk a dog. And that was considered to have overturned the government's argument. I did agree that the opposition won, but not for that reason. They won because they had a much better presentation, much more humor. They were much better off the mark. Altogether, better debate. So I think it's time to revise our thinking and get away from this business of proof and think more in terms of persuasion. Governments then would not need to make watertight arguments, and the opposition would have more room to fashion their own arguments without having to have it channeled and directed simply by the government. So if we were to concentrate more on persuasion and taking some good points and developing these and dealing with refutation where possible, I think we would have much more freedom of fashioning debates. I think we could have much more room for eloquence, for passion, for conviction, for humor, for knowledge, and so many other things that we have to put by the wayside because we are taken up and obsessed with this business of proof and disproof. And also, if we remember that in terms of adjudication scoring, if refutation is only at 20%, then maybe we can get back to having multi-adjudicators, 2 or 3 or 4, because after all, 80% of our scoring are based on other considerations. So I hope that we can talk about that in the time to come. Thank you.